Chapter 10. Be clear on the advantages and disadvantages. Every situation has both positives and negatives. Having known many aspiring designers, I often see talented individuals torn between needing to choose between a life of suffering and a life of joy. And you're probably not surprised to hear that many choose the path of suffering. There's a kind of allure to the mythical image of the tormented artist, as though their work would be enhanced by their pain and misery. As someone who has been around depression most of their life, I personally believe that we're predisposed to a certain manner of thinking. We gravitate towards seeing life through a particular lens, either one of pessimism or optimism, depending on our genetics and childhood experience. It's not as though we can't choose to see life in a different way, we just haven't been trained to. Seeing life differently requires our active attention and intent because we need to go against our natural inclinations. It requires us to slow down, pause, and refrain from responding to our initial urges. One technique people often try is to embrace the power of positive thinking. They refuse to see the downside of anything. But does blind optimism really help people get out of sticky situations? I'm not saying we should constantly flip between the two extremes of glory and despair. I'm simply saying we should try and add some balance to our perspective. Sun Tzu's core belief was that everything and everyone was imbued with the potential to create benefit and the potential to cause harm. Seeing only the positive or negative side of the equation should be a trigger telling us that we're missing a key piece of information, or more likely, that we're swept up in the fervor of events and not seeing the situation clearly. Let me remind you that you know this already. Whenever we make big decisions like purchasing a new home or deciding whether we should date that aloof friend, often against the advice of our closest confidants, we make a list. We make a list of the pros and cons to make sure we've thought through every little detail on both sides. This is exactly what we need to do. The hard part, though, is being able to look at the list objectively without emotion. Our minds quickly fall into the trap of trusting first impressions. We don't push ourselves far enough to develop a complete picture of what's happening. It's difficult for us to truly decouple our emotions from our decisions. Usually, we've already made up our minds about a decision before we even finish our list. We've made our choice and the list is there to give us a bit more comfort about our decision. Our minds are devilish little things, constantly looking for ways to keep us protected from pain, even if that means convincing ourselves that we've made the right choice. Have you heard of the couple that spent hours meticulously budgeting and setting rules for buying a house only to throw everything out the window and overpay for their dream home? Of course you have. This might even be you. To Sun Tzu, this is, frankly, lazy thinking. We can't have only positive thoughts, and we must not have only negative thoughts. When we only have positive thoughts, we're detached from reality. Our thoughts are imaginary, neither realistic or practical. At the same time, when we only have negative views, we'll be blinded to the opportunities that come knocking on our door. In the 8th year of the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Chinese government was on the brink of collapse. 8 years of Japanese occupation had brought them close to the edge. They had planned to retreat further south to current-day Sichuan. But then the Americans suddenly dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, causing them to surrender. The Chinese government was so focused on retreating, they were caught completely off guard by this surprise victory. They were so worn down from the 8 years of conflict, they had only planned for the worst. Some argued that China fell into a long period of disarray and civil war after their victory, partly because they never thought about if they would win and what they would do in that case. It's tempting for us to fall into a similar trap, especially when we feel like all our chips are on the table. We're so focused on surviving that we don't have enough time or energy to think of anything else. Emotional pain has this nasty ability to make our world and vision narrow and small. But, my friend, it's precisely in these moments that we need to be even more deliberate around our thinking. Because when your back is against the wall, you can't afford to make mistakes. A father loses his stallion. A common Chinese variant of the saying, "every cloud has a silver lining," roughly translates to when a man loses his horse. How do we know if he is unlucky or lucky? It comes from a story about a father who, through a careless mistake, let his prized stallion escape. "My stallion has run away because I was foolish and left the gate open. How will I ever get him back?" the father said. The small town came to console the man as he was extremely upset and sobbing over his mistake. An old man looked him in his eyes and said, "Yes, you've lost your horse, but how do you know if that is bad?" "Old man, leave the father alone. What could he possibly have to gain from the situation?" said someone in the group. The old man ignored the crowd and walked away. Days later, the father spotted some shapes in the distance, moving quickly toward him. It was his stallion. And not only did he return, he brought with him many beautiful mares. The father ran out to meet the horses, ecstatic that his horse had been saved by the gods. He remembered what the old man had told him and went to thank him for his wisdom. But when the old man heard about what had happened, he looked him in his eyes and said apathetically, "Yes, your horse has returned, but how do we know if this is good?" Confused like before, the father brushed it off and left. But again, the old man was right. One day, while the father was out tending to his vegetables, his son tried to ride one of the mares and was violently thrown off, breaking his legs. The father once more went to see the old man. The old man said, "Your son has broken his legs, but they will heal. How do we know that this is not good?" Shortly thereafter, the military came around, knocking on the doors of the villagers, looking for young men to draft into the army as they were gearing up for war. But the recruiters ignored the father's son because of his broken legs. When a man loses his horse, how do we know if he is unlucky or lucky? Sometimes we believe that life ought to be a certain way, but such thinking presumes we have some dominance over the mysteries of life. Such thinking can be dangerous because it says, if we think we can't win, we should not play, and if we think we can't lose, we cannot not play. We should always participate. The question we have to answer is, how? Fallen flowers and leaves. In Chinese culture, there's a special place for poetry that can express the indescribable feelings we have for our loved ones. In the Qing dynasty, there was a particularly moving poem written by Gongzaisin. He wrote, "The fallen colors of a tree do not represent the emptiness of love, because the return of spring will bring new flowers." Just because the flowers and leaves have fallen from a tree doesn't mean that they've lost their luster. The flowers will become the dirt and soil required for new life. Just because two people have lost their love doesn't mean that their love is over, because their love will become the energy and passion nurturing the next love. It was a moving and emotional poem written for someone the author must have dearly loved and lost. If we're lucky enough to receive a poem or a love letter from someone like Gongzaisin, we should feel grateful that they have taken the effort to pour out their emotional heart and soul for us. We should be thankful for their kind words. But we should also not believe a single word. Anyone who is capable of writing beautiful poetry is someone who is easily moved. When they were writing the poem, there's no doubt they were writing it from somewhere very special in their hearts of hearts. But I would guess that they're also the type of person who won't typically be able to keep the promises they've made. Why? Because someone who is easily moved won't be able to resist the new emotions that they will easily feel in new situations and with new people. Yes, they will move mountains and rivers for us, but they will just as easily do the same for somebody else. Look for deeper truths. It's surprising to me that many women are still holding themselves back in the workforce because they continue to expect nothing short of perfection from themselves. They wait until they feel ready for a job or until they've met all the specified requirements before they try to apply. Compare this behavior to men who find themselves suited for the task even if they're only 40% qualified. "Once I get the job, I'll figure it out," they'll probably say. While neither is probably the right approach, I do admire the risk aversion and accountability of women. Women would garner the praise of Sun Tzu, who would tell them that a person's demise often comes from being too fixated on the potential upside rather than from being too cautious or meticulous. People are too easily controlled and manipulated by shiny objects and incentives. They're easily coaxed by promises of cash and dreams, behaving like gamblers who are more willing to risk their last few dollars to win back their life savings than accept that they've lost. Stone Cattle Road. When you enter modern Sichuan from the west, you'll come across a road called Stone Cattle Road. It was named so because of an ingenious king from 316 BCE. King Huaiwen of Qin wanted to conquer the kingdom of Shu to the south, but Shu had a strategic geographic advantage. It was surrounded by long mountain ranges, making it difficult to ambush the enemy. But King Huaiwen was smart. He went with another tactic. He had his craftsmen make 5 life-size cows from stone. The craftsmen decorated the cows' tails and legs with gold, placing them where the citizens of Shu could see them. Rumors soon spread about these golden cows, and over time the rumors became more and more exaggerated. Some rumors became so extreme that it was said that the cows would regularly produce golden eggs. Eventually, the rumors reached the ears of Shu's king, who became absorbed by a dream of possessing these gold-producing cows. He ordered his men to dig a road from the capital city to these cows so they could be transported safely. Unfortunately, as you might have guessed, 3 months after the road was completed, the Qin army used the road to invade and conquer Shu. This might be a tragic, albeit funny, story, except that history tends to repeat itself time and time again. For instance, there's another story from the spring and autumn period where King Zhuang of Chu used a similar tactic to invade a much smaller kingdom of at the time. Only this time, instead of a cow, he used a golden bell as a gift. The ruler of the smaller kingdom didn't stop to think about why King Zhuang was giving him a gift. He just knew that he had to find a way to transport the bell safely. The king didn't pause to reflect on the motives behind Chu's actions. Passage through gale. In one chapter of the spring and autumn period, there existed a small state called Yu. Yu was for the most part not worth mentioning in history, apart from the fact that it stood between Jin and Guo. Guo reached out to the emperor of Yu, asking for safe passage through the country to invade Jin, but Yu refused. The Duke of Guo said, "Yu has refused to help us." "Tell me, what should be our next move?" One of his officials replied. "We must lure them with gold and riches. We must give them our national treasure, the jade stone." The Duke was shocked. "How could I give up my most prized piece of jade? It is irreplaceable." But the official shook his head. "We will only part with it temporarily. If Yu's emperor accepts our offer and opens his borders, over time we will be able to take both Go and Yu. Don't think of this as a gift, but rather a loan to you." On the other side, the officials to the Yu emperor begged him to not accept any deals. Our future is tied to the fate of Jin. We are allowed to live because both we and Jin oppose Guo. However, should Jin fall to Guo, we will be next in line to go. But the Yu emperor would not listen to any of the advice. He had once seen the beauty of the jade stone, and he wanted it. The Yu emperor agreed to grant Gu passage in exchange for the stone. Not even a year after Go had defeated Jin, Gu also took over Yu's lands. The Duke of Yu could see only the short-term benefits dangled in front of him, and didn't understand that the fate of Jin was tied to his own. Seeing beyond our yearnings requires a degree of mental expansiveness and agility because we must be able to hold two opposing concepts at the same time. We must be able to see that something can both help us and harm us at the same time. What might seem like a benefit on the surface may hide hurt and anguish inside. We need to carefully consider the price we might have to pay for the opportunities in front of us. We have to be clear on what we stand to gain and what we stand to lose. If we can apply a healthy degree of skepticism to our decisions, we won't be so easily fooled or used. This is challenging because humans have this insatiable greed for all the things we think will make us happy. And it's especially difficult to resist when people intentionally try to manipulate us. But don't be too hard on yourself because, with the right method and words, anybody can be fooled regardless of their power, intelligence, or influence. Someone who is logical can be fooled if you talk to them in an analytical way, whereas someone who is naturally emotional will be easily persuaded by displays of passion, loyalty, and connection. Zichen was one of the greatest prime ministers of the spring and autumn period, but even he was easily fooled by the unlikeliest of characters, his chef. How to fool a prime minister with a fish? I've never seen such an amazing fish. I wish so much to eat it, but take this fish away from me and release it. Zichen waved away his chef, who begrudgingly lugged a heavy wooden bucket with a beautiful, thrashing fish back to the kitchen. The fish was a gift to Zichen, a treasure rarely seen that far north in China. But Zichen, who thought of himself as a humble and extremely kind man, wanted to let the fish live. On the way back, the chef mumbled, "Well, if he doesn't want to eat it, I will eat it." What a wasted opportunity to let it go. Later that day, the chef snuck the fish out of the kitchen and brought it home. The next day, the chef said to Zichen, "Prime Minister, I released the fish, but something odd happened when I did. When I placed the fish into the river, it just floated there without moving for almost 20 minutes. I waited and waited, but only after a long time did it eventually swim away. Isn't that strange?" Zichen listened and then walked away, gently smiling and praising himself for doing a good deed. Later, the chef told his wife, "Everybody says that our great Prime Minister is extremely smart and intelligent. But he is such a fool. I couldn't have tricked him any more easily." Was Zichen a foolish man? Of course not. Zichen was fooled only because his chef knew how to talk to him. He knew that Zichen was a highly educated and analytical man, and his best chance of lying to him was if he made it a slightly unusual but logical scenario, tickling his intellectual curiosity. Zichen reasoned that because the fish had been out of the river for a while, it would have needed some time to regain its orientation to its surroundings when released into the river. It made complete sense to him that the fish might not swim away for at least 20 minutes. It was because what the chef said was so logical, and because Zichen was so knowledgeable about different subjects, that he believed what the chef had told him. Had the chef made the scenario simpler and said that the fish swam away immediately, Zichen might not have been so easily fooled. The mistress has no nose. I am truly the luckiest man alive. My empress is so loving that she will share and care about everything in my life, even my women. The emperor shouted loudly at his audience as his empress quietly smiled next to him. He was ecstatic because he had just received a young girl as a gift from a neighboring state. The empress took it upon herself to welcome the girl into court life, seeing that the emperor was deeply infatuated with the pretty girl. The empress built a friendship with her, often sharing gifts of food and clothes that she had received from other states. "Empress, I am so grateful for the care you have given me. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined having such a strong friendship with you. My child, the emperor is extremely fond of you. He has not faulted you for anything, except for one thing." The girl sat up. "What did he say?" "Well, he does not seem to be too fond of your nose. He says your nose is too big and not pretty at all. If I were you, the next time I see him I would cover my nose and try to hide it from his sight." Seeing as how the empress had taken care of her, the girl took her advice and took particular care to hide her nose from the emperor. One night, the emperor said to the empress, "Something strange has been up with that girl. Every time I spend time with her, she is covering her nose. I want to know why, but I am too embarrassed to ask her directly." "You are good friends with her. Surely you must know why." The empress hesitated. "It is not my place to say. I do not want to embarrass anybody." "Do not worry. I just want to understand the situation. I just want to help." "Well, it is because the girl thinks that you have an odor and smell. Sometimes she struggles to be around you." The emperor quickly summoned the girl and had her nose removed. A small person is particularly skilled in using slander. Slander can fool even the most intelligent person because it's speech that has been intentionally designed to trick and harm unsuspecting victims. Sun Tzu reminds us that we can't rely on what we see on the surface. We have to look deeper. Sometimes what seems logical on the surface hides a deeper deception, and other times What might seem apparently illogical on the surface might in reality be the truth. Strong beliefs held lightly. Although I can happily say that I've been privileged enough to be fully employed throughout my adult life, I've never found it easy to get a new job. I would spend a year or more going through the same process of scrolling through job boards, attending networking events, updating my resume, and filling out the same application forms for different companies. My hit rate for responses was abysmal, and to be honest, I could never quite figure out why. I would just chalk it up to not being competitive enough or because of my average grades. As you might imagine, whenever I did get invited for an interview, I would be ecstatic. I would be over the moon. But I would also try to tell myself to play it cool. Calm down, Jeff. How do I even know if this is the right role for me? Just because they wanted to interview me didn't mean that I would like the role or the company, and it definitely didn't mean that they would offer me the position. But I couldn't help myself. I prayed and hoped the interview would be my winning lottery ticket out of the rut I was in. And when the offer did come, although wiser observers would tell me to keep searching, I jumped at the first opportunity I got. I was tired of looking. I always found reasons to accept the first offer that came even when it was probably the wrong decision. Sometimes I had my suspicions. The company wasn't doing well financially, or I wouldn't fit in with the team, or my future boss would be a micromanager, but I didn't care. Any change would be better than what I had now, right? It, of course, also works the other way. When things are going well, we tend to become complacent and let our guard down. We're a woman on a mission, and nothing's gonna stop us. Sometimes we need this kind of motivation. When I'm looking for a job, I need this kind of motivation. Perseverance is tough when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But we should also know that in this territory, when we're heavily invested in the outcomes, our thinking and judgment is impaired. We fixate on what's directly in front of us and on the immediate consequences. Sun Tzu warns that we often fool ourselves first, before others even have the chance to. When that promotion is dangled in front of you, do you trust yourself to make the right choices? Will the extra pay be worth the additional work, responsibilities, and time away from your family and friends? To be fair, no one really knows the answers to these questions, so we go with what we think our instinct is telling us. Then again, no one really knows the answer to anything about the future. The future is by definition uncertain, which is why we tend to be biased toward our initial views. However, making a decision isn't just about picking a path. It's about picking the path that will take us and the people who depend on us closer to our goals while avoiding the traps and pitfalls on the way. I know it might not always seem this way, but know that real confidence comes from the realization that we don't need to rush into decisions. Slow down and make more deliberate decisions. Slow down and remind yourself that even the worst situation hides within it the opportunity for success, and even the best situation hides the potential for ruin. We can deal with our negative emotions and anger no matter how hard it might seem. However, a dead army cannot be resurrected. While we shouldn't be afraid of making decisions, we shouldn't take the consequences lightly. Find strength by placing yourself in the shoes of others. During the Warring States period, the state of Song was in panic as the much larger state of Qi had unexpectedly declared war. Knowing that it couldn't defeat Qi alone, Song sent an ambassador to the neighboring state of Chu to ask for help. Song's ambassador said, "Your emperor, my country is in dire need of help. Will you help us defend our land so that Qi doesn't devour us both?" The emperor of Chu replied, "My friend, we have been peaceful neighbors for many years. I will not stand idly by while you are threatened like this. Your safety is as important to me as it is to you. I will support and help you at all costs." Later that day, as the ambassador was riding home, his driver saw that instead of looking pleased with the outcome, the ambassador looked concerned and worried. The driver said, "Ambassador, didn't the Chu emperor agree to help us in this war? Why do you seem sad?" The ambassador shook his head. "Upsetting the large Qi state to save our small country is a decision that should not be taken lightly. but the Chu emperor agreed so quickly and with so much enthusiasm that I fear he is just playing with us. Sure enough, even after Song lost 5 of its biggest cities, Chu's army was nowhere to be seen. If the ambassador had studied history, he might have known earlier, because this was not the first time that states had played these kinds of tricks on their neighbors. Earlier in the spring and autumn period, the state of Yixing asked Qi for help when it was attacked by Jin. Bao Shuya, a high-ranking political statesman in Qi, who was known for being a kind and generous leader, agreed to send armies in to defend Yixing. But when did Bao Shuya send his armies in? Not until the very end. Not until the Yixing dynasty was almost entirely decimated by Jin. Bao Shuya said, "If I had sent my armies in at the beginning, Xing would be thankful for my help, but they would not be as thankful as they are today. Additionally, by waiting, it will be easier for my armies to defeat the Jin army, as they would have expended more of their energy fighting Yixing. I'm still supporting our friends and the outcome is the same, but now Yixing owes me more because they know they were at the brink of destruction and I brought them back from the edge." Although Bao Shuya was kind and generous, he was also ruthless in performing cost-benefit analysis. When we clearly understand the advantages and disadvantages from our own vantage point, and also from the perspectives of the people around us, we can use that understanding to find the leverage we need to increase our chance for success. It's a maxim that's easy to understand, but difficult to execute, mostly because we generally don't know how to put ourselves in the shoes of others. We haven't taught our minds to think that way. Our train of thought is frequently interrupted by our own frustrations, distractions, and drive for self-preservation. Most people, for example, are impatiently worrying about what to say next in a conversation rather than listening. While this is fine for the most part, it won't cut it if our goal is to thrive in life. Because although we're usually the protagonist in our own movie, it's highly unlikely that we're also the protagonist in other people's movies. Sun Tzu didn't believe in the myth of the lone genius that is able to create magnificence while ostracizing others. The world doesn't revolve around one person. What you want is to start cultivating views that consider and include the other actors in the scene alongside you to get closer to seeing a clearer, more accurate picture of reality. When we can do that, life becomes less of a gamble. We're not just rolling the dice and hoping that our investment of time, energy, and money pays off in a big way. At some point, with enough practice, something mysterious will happen to you. Your mind will turn from constantly fussing about where you don't measure up or how embarrassing your actions were to thinking about the consequences events might have on the people around you. Suddenly, your mind will become less inwardly focused and more receptive to the plight of others. What do they stand to gain or lose? What influences their choices? How will they react? You'll instinctively start thinking in terms of advantages and disadvantages, and this skill will start to become your secret sauce. Expanding your decisions to include wider perspectives will be the key to unlocking your success. For a military leader like Sun Tzu, this was an invaluable talent. He could control people by showing how they could be harmed if they acted in the opposite way to how he wanted them to behave. He could show them where it was safe to play and where it was dangerous to enter, efficiently drawing a boundary around them. Decision-making is a muscle. There's a wonderful mechanism built into nature that ensures we gain confidence as we age. No matter how much we want to remain naive, playful children, with time and experience comes a growing trust in who we are. There is strength that comes from simply living. Unfortunately, along with that confidence comes the counterbalancing force of closed-mindedness. As we gain that confidence, we also start to close off the world. Sometimes that's a virtue. We can be like a proud father trying to protect his children by passing on his experience and wisdom. But like all good fathers, we should also know that there's so much more out there for our children than we could ever hope to know. Shoshin is a word from Zen Buddhism meaning beginner's mind. It means dropping our ideas and expectations and seeing life with an open mind just like a beginner would. Do you remember what it was like the last time you learned something new? You were probably slightly confused and disoriented, but there was probably also a feeling of curiosity, excitement, and wonder. That's the beginner's mind. Shunryu Suzuki writes, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." It takes work and encouragement to cultivate a consistent beginner's mind. We find it easier to hold on to the first idea, thought, or reason that pops into our heads. It's particularly difficult for subjects in which we have a great deal of experience and knowledge. Without having some essence of a beginner's mind, we stop seeing the full picture of what's happening. We see only the parts that align with our beliefs. In other words, we become stubborn. And while I can't definitively give you an answer for how to distinguish a feeling of genuine intuition from genuine stubbornness, I can tell you that it's always worthwhile to pay closer attention to what you might not initially agree with. Some people find this intimidating. It's easier and more comfortable to dive straight into a decision without thinking about it too much. We either don't want the responsibility, don't want to feel restricted, or don't feel as though we'll be able to make the right choices for the group. Trust me, I get the feeling. I've made my fair share of bad decisions in my life, but having worked at this for a while, I can also tell you that getting over this hurdle starts with recognizing that you don't have to be perfect. Life is one big experiment and a mystery, so the key is to keep trying until you find a way that works for you. Begin by finding somewhere where your wrong decision has the least potential to be detrimental to your life. I once heard Tony Robbins say that decision-making was a muscle. It grows stronger every time we exercise it through deliberate, well-thought-out choices. I utterly and completely subscribe to this view, and I'm sure Sun Tzu would as well. We don't have to be afraid of making choices because we know our ability to make decisions will grow stronger with every choice we make. Sure, we might not like how the first few decisions might turn out, but we will learn. We'll learn how to deal with the consequences. We'll learn more about how our minds work. We'll learn how to get around our mental hang-ups and obstacles. They say that only a few animals on the planet have the ability for self-awareness or reflection, and I would say that one of the more subtle joys in life is being able to watch your mind mature. I'm sure you remember when you made some pretty embarrassing choices in college, or maybe you have chosen to not remember them. I remember the time when I drove over a raised median strip as a shortcut while making a right turn, running over the dirt and flowers, much to the horror of my mum. To this day, I still don't know why I did that. Through time and experience, your decision-making muscle will grow stronger. So take a moment to admire this beautiful, natural, human-only ability of self-reflection. Align what you value with others. It's hard for us these days to dissociate a feeling of value from a transaction. Markets have filled our lives with so many wonderful toys like Apple computers and Tesla vehicles. Something or someone is only valuable if they are desired by somebody else. And the more someone desires that something, the more they must be willing to pay for it. While this consumes the lives of the economics and finance whiz kids at Harvard and Wharton, you and I live on Main Street, and here on Main Street, viewing the world solely through a transactional lens makes it terribly small. After a while, the only question we get used to asking is, what are we going to get out of it? There's nothing particularly wrong with that. Sun Tzu is all for doing cost-benefit analysis. But if we only focus on our own pocket of the world and ignore the plight of others, we place a limit on what we can accomplish. What's the point of weeding only a corner of the garden? What's the point of having a concert for only one person? Imagine how wonderful it would be if you could create a unique event attended by thousands of people with your own vibe. There's magic that transpires not from the music or the venue, but from the crowd itself. Most of us, though, don't think in such grand terms. When you talk about creating value for others, you're probably thinking more along the lines of picking up trash from the streets or walking your neighbor's dog. Sun Tzu says to dream bigger. Motivate and align yourself with the interests of the greatest number of people. Those people could be anyone, colleagues on your team, members of your church, or people in the local community. I remember a story about a high-ranking public official who understood value well. Sue, a pseudonym, grew up in Asia but was one of the first international students to be accepted by a prestigious Ivy League college on the East Coast of the United States. Tzu graduated with high distinctions and was interviewed by journalists because of her relatively unusual background at the time. A journalist asked her, "Could you tell me about your experience at the school? Did you find yourself under a lot of stress and competitive pressure?" A barely 30-year-old Tzu replied, "I didn't feel like it was competitive at all. Everyone I studied and worked with was smart and at the top of their game. The world is so big it can easily accommodate every one of us. And if we all find ways to contribute to the future of this planet, we can create a better society for all." It was already clear that Tzu was destined for a bright future, not only because of her intelligence and knowledge, but because of her attitude. She didn't think of competition and value as a zero-sum game, where someone had to lose for another to gain. To be able to tap into the possibilities for the biggest opportunities in life, we need to tackle issues that benefit the most people. Focusing just on ourselves or only one other person is, by definition, unlikely to create significant change in the world. Sun Tzu's teaching here is pretty simple. The more we're able to share and distribute benefits to others, the more others will be influenced and willing to promote our goals. Learn to market and share the word of your work so people know about all the good you're doing. What better way is there to protect yourself than by having the greatest number of people on your side? Look, you might as well set some big, hairy, audacious goals for causing some dramatic change at this point, because it'll probably take the same amount of effort and risk anyway. Some of you, I know, will balk at this. Helping others is politically correct, but really, normally there's a range of emotions associated with this kind of thinking because it probes our sense of morals and ethics. Trust me, I don't underestimate how hard this is to do. It's scary because we tend to feel like we would be left shortchanged if we put others ahead of us. Our wives and children should come first. There has to be a kind of faith that you'll be taken care of, even when you're focusing on helping other people. But as far as I know, Sun Tzu didn't care much for spirituality. Sun Tzu knew he would be taken care of, not because of his altruistic motives or his belief that good things happen to good people. He knew he would be rewarded because the law of large numbers would be on his side. Do it because the more people we can convince to get into the same car with us on our road trip, the merrier it'll be. Do it because we'll have more people to share the burden of driving with. Do it because we'll have more adults to deal with the teenagers that will grudgingly come along but complain the entire way. If we did something that benefited 20 people, those 20 people would help to support and implement your actions. But if you were able to benefit 2,000 people, suddenly you would have 100 times the support. It's the same with 10,000 people as it is with 100,000 people. On the other hand, if you only took actions that benefited yourself, not only might you not find any support for your cause, people might also turn around and put up a fight. One subtle and not so obvious implication here is the importance of remaining laser-focused on your goals. Prioritize actions that unlock benefits for people along the way. If you spend too much time and energy on defensively blocking and tackling, you'll be constantly reacting to what life is throwing in your direction instead of moving forward. Remember that it is the hope and promise of gain that lures people to you.